everyone. How are y'all doing? Good. I'm Christina Joy. This is Sankofa Video Books and Cafe. Welcome to Scholar Hour. I don't know how many weeks we've been doing this now, but we've been doing it for a little minute. Probably since like late summer. Mid to late summer. So we're getting somewhere. We in the fall now. Tonight we will have a discussion with the lovely Dr. Psyche Williams-Forson, and we're discussing her book, Eating While Black. So let's begin. One, really just how are you? And this is a very informal conversation. We try to just, of course we're going to talk about the book, but I would just like to know how you doing.
Good. Thank you. Good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited about to talk about and answer questions and just have a dialogue.
Is it a little too? Is it loud? Is it too loud? Is it good? Is it good?
It's fine.
Okay. So I must say, Eating While Black. This title, like the book cover, everyone's looking at it like I haven't. When people are really interested in a book, they look at the cover, they may like make a face and be like, "What's going on in this book?" Like I've seen that all week. The books have been sitting up there in the front by the front door, and everyone passed like, "What's this?" And so I'm sure as you've been in this field, I guess, like you get a lot of questions surrounding why is the relationship between food and Black people important?
Yeah.
And let's start there.
Yeah. Well, food is obviously important to all of us, right? But in particular for Black people. So I'll just start with why and how I wrote this book. Because my first book, Building Houses Out of Chicken Legs, Black Women, Food and Power, I looked at Black people and the stereotypes around chicken. Because, a lot of things were going on and it was 2000 and I was like, are we still having this conversation around Black people being connected to chicken and watermelon? Right? So I did that work. And then, as some of you have heard this story a couple of times, but midway through the writing process, I said, I just started to feel drained, focusing on the stereotype, because for me, that wasn't the story. I knew why, I had always heard the stereotype, and I knew from cookbook to cookbook foods that were associated with Black people. What I didn't know is why. And that was what I was interested in, why. So in the study of the why, I came across a group of Black women in Gordonsville, Virginia, who were considered the original fried chicken entrepreneurs in Virginia, because they used to sell chicken at the train station. Now, this is something that was pretty common, pretty much at every whistle stop, especially in rural areas. Wherever a train stopped, you would have people rushing the train. But this was an organized effort that went on for at least 3 generations. And one of the women in the last generation gave an interview and she said, my mother built our place out of chicken legs. And the first one burnt down. The first house burnt down. And so she rebuilt it. So that was the story for me, right? Black people doing amazing things with food. Right, moving themselves into circles of generational wealth, right? Being creative, being inventive, coming up with recipes, things that, the film Soul Food, I look at Chris Rock's Big Piece of Chicken. I'm looking at how Black people do all kinds of things with chicken. And that was the story. But while I was talking about that book, a lot of changes were happening in the food world. A lot more people, we started to have the resurgence of gardening, right? Because, we always have this conversation and then it comes back and then it dies down and comes back again. So right around the time that I was 20, in 2006 and 7, when I was talking about building houses, we started seeing refrigeration in dollar stores. We started seeing more and more people moving into plots of land and advocating grow your own food is the thing to do. But for me, I started seeing a lot of shame and moralism being attached to that, imperative, if you will. And people saying things like, why can't we get people to stop eating this, that, and the other? And so, and it was white to black, but also black on black. And so I began to think about it, and I said, some of this is a project of anti-black racism. And for some black people, it's a product of internalized racism. This need to be acceptable and accepted in a space that was never designed for you to be, let alone be accepted. So while you're shifting yourself to fit into this groove, the shift keeps happening because the problem is the room, it's not you. And so I wrote the book for us to have a conversation about what it means to food shame, what does it mean to celebrate our food cultures, and be critical of them at the same time. So that really is what I'm doing here.
We got too much on the table. But so when I picked up your book, I was really curious because how do I say this? I guess for me, I'm someone who had like a health nut as a father, like who made sure that we didn't eat red meat, that was very like particular about what we ate to the point that I used to get made fun of in school for like the type of bread I would bring to school because he used to get pumpernickel bread. Right. And all the kids in elementary school be like, is that chocolate? Is that chocolate bread? And I was like, no, it's pumpernickel. Right. So like when I started reading this, I was like, this is interesting because I've experienced food shame from other Black people in terms of like how healthy I chose to be or like how I was raised. But then the other flip side of it is what you're exploring here, and that other Black people and then white people shaming us for only eating soul food, for only eating fried chicken, for only eating XYZ. And it's even funny now, like our last scholar hour was with Dr. Baruch, and so Dr. Baruch obviously has strong opinions about chicken and all the things. But it's like obviously it comes from a place of like I want to heal Black people. So like, where's the line in the middle? Why can't we all just live?
Right.
and eat?
Right. And I think that's the line in the middle. It's where you put it. It's what makes you happy, right? I'm not against healthy eating. Healthy. How are we defining healthy is the question. How are we defining that, right? I also come from a household, and you've heard this story a couple of times. My dad had got diabetes when I was about 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7, and our household changed our diet. No more white flour, really low white sugar. We had to go to Sweet and Low back when Sweet and Low first came out, and we didn't know at first. We put a whole pack of Sweet and Low or something. But I've also eaten government cheese, and so because we were a family of 5 in Buffalo, New York, and only one income, right? And so we went to Meatless Mondays and Tuna Fish Tuesdays, and Wednesdays was always we had to go through the encyclopedia with the underlining everything that was false, and I learned then that the homie is larger than Tennessee, because that's how our household was, right? We came up in a Black liberation household, so freedom was very key at a very young age, I realized, I don't like fish with bones, but my family does, because I can't eat them, because, So my point is, we had an eclectic diet.
Right.
I've been to ashrams and, and eaten vegan and so on. So, there's a range. My daughter is raised with an eclectic palate, So my point is, be.
Right.
Your body tells you if you have too much inflammation. Your body tells you if you're waking up every morning with phlegm. Your body tells you what's going on, right? I don't really think we need other people to tell us what we need to do. That's my point, right? We can police ourselves.
Right.
And so that's the part of the agenda that for me is an anti-Black racism piece, This need to constantly surveil Black people's bodies.
Right.
And to constantly be in, how do we get you to do, I don't need you to get me to do anything.
Right.
And I think one of the lines in the book is from the film, it's not Brick City, I've forgotten, I always forget. But the guy says, Katrina has always been around us, it just has a different name. And so, there are a couple of different stuff. I try to tell, this was a hard book to write, right? Because I try to tell a lot of stories, and a lot of those stories were based on my own experiences, but also where we see different things happening in popular culture.
Right.
I don't do so much, I don't think, with music, but film, literature, and even I had an experience when I was, with a partner, where while he was celebrating his Ghanaian foodways, it inadvertently was, a matter of shaming, the foods that I was cooking. So, we can do it unintentionally, and there's no blame there. I'm just pointing it out to us so that we know and are aware as we go about our everyday lives. That's a great point.
You're right, especially that opening story with the sister on the train. I was
Story.
Yeah, I was like, oh, you must live in the DMV before I even realized you were right here.
Oh yeah.
Essentially, the sister on the train was eating, and we know that WMATA has the rule you can't eat on the train. Somebody took a picture of the sister and she was a WMATA employee, so that made it worse.
Wow.
Took a picture of her and was like, oh my God, this WMATA employee out here eating on the train, like, how can this happen at WMATA? Like, and the Black lady said, worry about yourself. Okay. Like,
That's classic.
exactly. And like, how many times do we hear about Black people getting harassed when we're eating? Like, when we minding our own business, having food in a coffee shop, doing whatever, and it's like, why? And it's, as soon as you, that just between that story and then when I really started to think about it, it's like, you're right. We're constantly policed while in the act of just being with our food. And I guess that, can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, and the thing about that story is, according to the Washington Post, WMATA actually apparently had sent out a memo saying that they were no longer going to be giving out tickets and citations for eating on the train. So what it becomes is a metaphor for me of we know what we're doing. It's when other people don't know what we're doing and then try and tell us what we should be doing, that's where I start to see that problem. So she, as a WMATA employee, was very clear about what she was doing, right? And so here you have, and then what the unmitigated gall to post it on Twitter? Yeah, what are you doing here, right? Now, she received a lot of backlash, and she had a book contract that apparently was being rescinded. Do y'all remember this happened a couple of years ago? Yeah, okay. Yeah, this happened. It was an amazing display of arrogance, right? It's really what it was. It was an amazing display of arrogance. And I'm sorry, I forgot your question, but I wanted to tell this one story though, about one of the kind of what I mean. So I attended this talk at the University of Maryland with the author Eric Schlosser, who wrote Super Size Me, I think it was.
Right.
So it's an interesting talk, and he's a journalist, and so a lot of his mantra for the evening was just, buy local. What we need to do is support local businesses, buy and eat local, and I agree. But there's another side to that, which I'll get to in a moment, because when we talk about pushing buy local, sometimes we forget about migrant and trans-migrant peoples for whom local food doesn't necessarily translate, right? Especially when you get beyond the DMV, where we have a plethora of different kinds of markets. Go out to the Midwest and talk to some people who are from the continent or from the Caribbean and from Haiti, and ask them where they're getting food, where they're getting their food, right? And then you get a different story. They've had to readjust their entire palette, not only to the climate, but also to what's available to them. In many cases, that's Walmart. Because it's hard to get, goat meat out there in some places, or halal goat meat, or it's hard to get dry fish, or, TZ, or fufu, or goosey, or whatever the case may be, right? So there's two sides to the eat local piece that we just, and I'm trying to encourage us to think broadly in that way outside of ourselves. Because there are other people who rely upon foods coming in order for them to be able to sustain themselves culturally, especially when you live in, as a Black person, in areas that are devoid of other Black people. So there's that. But Eric Schlosser. So he gave his talk, he was talking about eat local. And at the end of his talk, at least 3 Black women got up and basically testified to changing their diet. And after the last woman said, I read your book and I just stopped. I used to love strawberry milkshakes, and I just stopped drinking them because I felt like I was putting too many preservatives in my body. And I will never forget, I sat there, he said, wow, that's an extreme, response. And, and I looked at that, I didn't expect him to say that. And I said, you know what, sisters, we're up here seeking validation from a person who then turns around and tells you that your action was extreme because you live as what's her name? The sociologist who used to have the talk show. Why am I blanking on MSNBC? Melissa Harris Perry. As Melissa Harris Perry writes in her work, we're living in a crooked room, balancing on a crooked chair. And that's what I meant. You trying to right yourself in a room that is never going to be straight. So you may as well enjoy your strawberry milkshake. It's going to give you joy. Because, I don't know, you're out here testifying, and testimonies are very powerful. And I felt very bad for each one, right? It was at least 3 Black women who got up and talked about changing their diet. And that's fine. You can do that. Do it for you. Don't do it for the validation of other people, let alone a white man whose book you've read, who basically said, I don't eat clean. Because we're into this whole thing about clean and dirty eating. And he's like, I don't eat clean. He's like, I eat local. And I eat from restaurants that treat their employees with a living wage. But he was like, I eat meat.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So that's part of that, again, that's part of that anti-Black racist agenda that I think we have to be careful about adopting wholesale without interrogating what else is going on. It's fine if you want to eat that. Another story that I tell is about going to a Black History Month program in Philly. And at one of the museums up there. And the chef was a Black vegan, Black and vegan. He was back there cooking, and a white woman was giving us this presentation. And she was giving us all the kinds of misinformation about Black folks being scraps. That's a whole other part of the conversation, right? The part I want to get at, though, is that we were getting these meals, these small plates, and the last dish was some greens. And they were good. And so when the chef came out for us to have this conversation, one of the women in the group was just going on and tell me how I can cook these greens. because my mother-in-law is always using pork. She's getting up on Sunday morning before she goes to church, blah, blah, blah. He said, well, and then he starts listing the ingredients, one of which is black truffles. Black truffles are unattainable. You can't afford black truffles. I mean, many chefs can't, you know. So here again, we're reaching for something that we can't obtain. He said, and, you know, I have to tell you, it's not just collard greens. It's like carrot tops. He listed like 6 different ingredients. So, you know, again, I don't fault her for wanting to eat her greens differently. My concern was you were willing to throw your mother-in-law all the way under the bus for something you cannot obtain. You know, because it's out of reach. You can't get that taste, you know, again. But what you can do is maybe just use some liquid smoke, or just don't use anything at all. Use, if you want to use chicken stock or whatever. I don't know, turkey meat, anything. You know, I mean, there's lots of different ways you can, without just saying, you know, and recognizing her mother-in-law is of a certain age, a certain generation, and it's hard for people to change their food habits. You know, it's hard to go into those things, so we have to be careful.
You know, that's a good point, because even back within my own family, because my father was this way, I've just kind of been a little bit more health conscious. I'm not even that, like, all the way that healthy, you know, in the grand scheme of things. But I guess going back and forth between, like, my grandmother, who is so finicky when it comes to food. She don't even eat tacos. She's like, what is that? Like, but she's first generation Caribbean, and you know, she loves cooking soul food. She's like throws down, okay, like between the desserts and the entrees, the apple pies, the mac and cheese, all that. But as soon as I stopped, like, I became severely lactose intolerant, and I stopped eating mac and cheese, stopped eating all this stuff. You know, she gets so offended when I come home, and I'm like, I can't eat that, Grandma. Like, you don't eat nothing. Like, what can I cook? What can I? And she just wants me to enjoy it. Yeah. And I be feeling so bad, but it's like, I think between generations, that's probably happening a lot more, because people are trying to be healthier and for whatever reason. And the older generation are like, well, we've been eating this way since forever, and we fine, like, But then it's also like, she also does recognize that, like, the food has changed, like the food quality has changed, and that the things that she used to buy are not the same things that she was buying before. And she's like, I can taste the difference in just about anything. Yes, of course. And it's so interesting to me because, like, I guess that's only two generations. Yeah. And to see that this thing you've been buying your whole life, you noticed when exactly it changed. And now I'm starting to see that myself, and I'm like, that it's wild. It's wild. So it's like, there's a lot to navigate within this food shaming space, within the food space in general. But I think, you sharing this perspective really helped me be like, we don't need to shame each other for it, because that's exactly what we're doing.
Right. So one of the things I like to encourage people to think about is what healthy means to you. Like you said, you're lactose intolerant. Most Black people are. Right. And yet you want to engage in and celebrate with your grandmother. And so you can say, but I do need you to make me this mac and cheese, but with this nutritional yeast, which has a similar consistency, right? Cheese, or your vegan cheese, or whatever. And I told this story in Baltimore last week about when I first started graduate school in the 90s. I took my sisters and my mom to this little cafe in Berwyn Heights, Maryland. It used to be called the Rising Sun Cafe, right? You know, Rising Sun. And the menu was up on a chalkboard, and they were looking. They were like, "We don't understand anything on this menu, okay?" Because it was like blue corn, pancakes, sunrise, this, that, and the other, which was made out of tofu or seitan or whatever. They were like, "Yeah, no, we need to go to IHOP." And they were very clear about that. And 20 years later, my sisters are vegan. Okay, so we need room for people to grow, but to move and evolve. They may, in 20 more years, they may decide they're not vegans,
Right.
and that's still growth.
Right.
Because part of what we got to remember is, as humans, we move. We don't stay in one place, or some of us do. And then that's a whole nother conversation. But many of us are moving and flowing through. To your point about food not tasting the same, I grew up with my mom having a garden, and I distinctly remember and I know what a country tomato looks like, right? I know what it looks like. So seeing the aromas in the grocery store, I'm bothered because they look manufactured, right? So, but you also are very clear, like you said, that between climate and our soil and just, all kinds of things, you run into all kinds of differences in your food supply, right? And so I think it's really important for us to just allow each other to move about. So I just want to say a thing about soul food. So, soul food is it's a way of cooking, right? And a lot of the ingredients are very similar to what we find in Southern cooking: sugar, flour, whole milk, different spices and so forth. But the concept of soul food is a political term, right? That was coined by Amiri Baraka, who was talking specifically in response to a journalist who said Black people had no culture. And his response was, Black people have soul. And we have it in our music, and we have it in our clothes, and we have it in our food. And then he lists about 20 to 30 foods that we cook. And then if you remember the group the song Soul Man, Isaac Hayes and so forth, but they're talking about the ability to keep on keeping on, right? So it's a way of doing, and that's where we get this notion of making a way out of no way with food. Yes, we did, but also I want folks to include in making a way out of no way the fact that we were some of the original foragers alongside indigenous people, right? We ate from the land, so we didn't just eat scraps that were given to us. We hunted. If you are in the Eastern Seaboard, you fished, right? You trapped. You did all kinds of things. You foraged. You got berries and nuts and and all of this. You grew a garden if you were able to. So understanding more about early America for Black people, because we know enslavement lasted for centuries and not just the 1800s, we would see a changing evolutionary way of cooking and eating and being, right? And I think most of us know about slavery what we know from Gone with the Wind. That because popular culture brought us that. But for those of us who have studied institutions of slavery, I saw the Eric Williams book up on the table there, Capitalism and Slavery. Those of us who study enslavement and the institution understand that white folks needed a healthy labor supply. And we weren't going to get that just from eating scraps. George Washington deliberately said, I need to buy some of the things that my slaves are growing, because I want them to stay healthy and I want them to continue to make this food and share with each other. Well, that wasn't because he was benevolent. That's because he needed a healthy labor supply. And so understanding those dynamics, then we understand our resiliency and our ingenuity and our creativity, and we understand the legacies that Black people have had with food, and that they are not just one-dimensional. Sometimes they involve, McDonald's. Sometimes they involve Kenny's. Sometimes they involve your grandmother's pantry. Sometimes they involve a restaurant. but none of us out here are eating in a way that is wholly healthy as defined. And I like to thank my brother here for tweeting what I said last week of the constellation, right? I said the constellation of things that can kill Black folk in America, food is kind of low on the list.
Come on now, come on. That was a quote, and that was a sermon all in and of itself.
So we need to stop acting like that's the thing that's killing us. Even though, yes, our health contributes to that, but what about my mental health? What about my emotional health? What about going to work every day and not feeling like got to cuss somebody out every single day because people are looking at me and doubting me, even though I have multiple degrees and 3 books, and I still have to every day prove myself. But yet you're worried about my food? I'm worried that I don't slap somebody with a frying pan. So my point is, again, I'm okay with we're having these big conversations, food. But there are other things that while we're focusing on the food, our voting rights are being taken away. Our reproductive health is in question, right? All of these kinds of things that keep us not focused on the oppressions, oppressions, repressions, suppression, right? Depression. Right? And recession.
All the sessions.
Right. So our obsession is really like it's very much, I feel it is very much misplaced in focusing on food.
This is a well-loved carpet.
That's well stated.
The whole moment was everything. Because you're right. We have books in here, Under the Skin by Linda Villarosa. That's about how stress is literally killing all of us. Look, particularly Black people, like especially Black people. How weathering of all the various factors that you just mentioned are literally destroying our very selves. Like, and that contributes to the way we eat. Like, being depressed can lead you to want to eat a whole tub of ice cream. And regardless of the fact that yes, most Black people are lactose intolerant, regardless of if you're ignoring it or not. But and so.
And then you wake up the next day and you realize, oh my gosh, I can't do that anymore. Right. So again, our bodies tell us what's healthy for us. And the thing that we want to be clear about is that everybody is different, because what's healthy for you may not be for you, even though we have these prescriptions that say you need to eat the Mediterranean diet. And I'm not saying that you don't, because, tomatoes and garlic and olive oils and things like that are great for you. But I want us to also allow for this notion that the food that Black people eat is bad, to really take a rest. Okay? Because the food we eat is the food that everybody else eats. It's how we prepare it with lots of flavor and so forth. Also, a lot of us use a lot of spices, a lot of pepper. Whether it's malagueta or if it's habanero or whatever the case may be. And so we're combating some of those things as well by eating fiery foods. And so again, my encouragement is that we look at the whole scope of the ways in which people justify shaming us, because we're bad people. And that's really what it ends up coming down to. Black bodies are out of control. First of all, we inhabit bodies, so we're human. So Black people's lives are out of control. Either our bodies are moving in a way that's not healthy, or we're doing something we shouldn't be doing, or we're not shopping where we should be shopping. And there's nothing, I have no problem with advocates who want to bring in grocery stores and things into communities. I have no problem with that. I think we absolutely need to. And so I understand the conversations around food deserts and food apartheid, right? And I want us to recognize that even without grocery stores, we know how to eat.
And have been.
all our lives. I mean, I grew up in moving back to rural Virginia. You know, I watched my uncle used to go, he never went really to a grocery store. He'd be like, can you run up to Mr. Cole's for me? And he'd wait a while, he'd touch the pencil and write it on the back of a, he'd tear off a piece of a paper bag. And he wanted cheese from a block of sharp cheddar cheese. He wanted some bacon. He wanted some strawberry jam. And he wanted one other thing. And he lived to his 80s, you know, as a small man, as a small person. He lived his life because that's what worked for him. He drank his liquor, he ran his numbers, you know, and he lived his life. Okay, so I'm not sure why we get here in 2022 and act like these things are not part of who we are as a people working the underground. We've always worked the underground. Now you call it a hustle, but we've always worked the underground, right? And so we are people of resilience, and I need us to recognize that again, I don't have a problem with us advocating all these things, but that's that middle ground. That's that moving the line. You put the line where you need the line to be so you can live your life in joy, right? And when you live your life in joy, you're one step closer to some kind of liberation. And as I've said in each one of these talks, if Black people recognize the power we had in claiming our joy and our liberation, we could move political movements in this country in ways that the world has never seen. And white folks know that. That's why they try to keep us where they keep us. Shaming and looking at ourselves and looking at each other and worried about what you see on social media. And then we got our young people all twisted up out here and old people out here worried about what's on social media, which half the time is just probably as big as my hand, but it becomes magnified. And we're all caught up in the wrong thing. We're all caught up in those things that keep us stressed out, things that keep our minds twirling, things that keep us arguing with each other. Right, over what? $1.15? Because we haven't recognized that this country isn't going to let us get us so far. So.
I was going to ask, do you think that's also a part of like creating a disconnect between like us and our bodies? Because like you were saying before, like, and I definitely read that too, like your Bible tell you. It's just that like seems like a lot of these things now you're really just like, I guess like a part of the subjugation of Black bodies is to basically have us disconnected from that. So do you think that's like kind of like one of the biggest cases right there? That like there's like really this need for us to really actually like listen to our bodies.
Absolutely. I mean that's an agenda. If I can keep you disconnected from your body, you're not listening to what's happening. You're not listening to the fact that your body says I need more water. Or your body's saying slow down, or your body is saying rest, or your body's saying get off of all that stuff, stop putting that stuff in your body. And I'm talking, you know, the whole range of social media, right? You need to decompress, right? I think that or you need to take a mental health day. You know, some of us need mental health month. I need a mental health year or two. Because we're coming out of COVID, right? And some of us lost loved ones and friends and so forth. And so your body tells you what you need to do. But while we are focused on things that, in the grand scheme of things, are really actually kind of low on the totem pole, we remain, like you said, disconnected.
Also, I feel like that also has to disconnect between our food, because like when we brought up the history about like how we were like foragers and all that type of stuff too. Like Black people have always just had a relationship with just everything.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty
especially
much,
with the land.
Yeah, so it's like it's kind of like this society pretty much like just it's almost like ripped us from even this land that we're on.
We've always been ripped from land,
Yeah,
right? We were ripped from one land and brought to another, and then some of us were brought to another because many of us went to the Caribbean and then in South America, and then we came here, and then from here we maybe were taken north and brought south, and then went back north. So we've always been movers, moving about, movement. Right? And so that's the other reason why I'm saying when we talk about eating local, what is local today for you could be foreign to you tomorrow, because we always are moving about. And so, you know, I remember growing up in either place, either New York or in Virginia, and, you know, picking up one of the weeds that you chew on, you know, and if you haven't had that beauty and that experience, I'm sorry, because now I think I would be afraid to do it. Because you don't know what's in the soil. Right? But growing up, we could pick up, you could just look at the kind of weed and you could pick it up and chew it and, you know, excuse me, and so forth. And so I think we just, it's important for us to be mindful of those kinds of things. I mean, our water supply is in jeopardy from Flint to Mississippi, you know, from Flint, Michigan to now to Mississippi. We're in trouble, right? And so the last thing we need to do as Black people is shame each other around trying to just survive in these United States of America.
Oh, I know this. Yo, we getting fed tonight, right? We getting fed, and and you know, I'm thinking back to your book and how you had referenced Chidamama Adichie in the single story, and what you even said about Gone with the Wind, about that being like a particularly big reference for slavery and how people were. But it's like, if y'all haven't watched Sankofa, the movie, that's one of the best depictions. I mean, not, you know, like that. It's one of the best depictions of slavery I've ever seen in my life. So it's diverse. It's like, it shows how people were being transported back and forth, not just in America. You know, like there were Caribbean people on the plantation, there were other people on the plantation. People were still practicing their African spirituality, and you know, like that whole danger of the single story, it's real. Yeah. Because until I saw Sankofa, I had never seen such a great depiction of like what it actually probably was like. Right. And
well, because between Gone with the Wind and Django, you probably think that you probably think this is what enslavement is like. But actually, the majority of plantations were really farms. Yeah. They were small. People had maybe one or two enslaved folks. You had some of the large plantations as well, but I mean, we have to remember Prince George's County. All of this was slave territory, and so we had a lot of small homes that there were maybe 2 or 3 people. So it was very few of this sort of largesse kinds of spaces, and that's why I encourage people, you know, to read the 1619 Project or read other texts before, you know, you get on Twitter and start having at it, because, you know, a lot of times the information is just very inaccurate. And so what we see in those popular culture depictions tend not to be true. Tend not to be, oh, I don't want to say they're not true, they're not wholly true. Right. They're not wholly true. There are lots of different ways that we can understand it. So I do encourage you to read the book. I should say I deal with farmers markets and something that I call Black food energy, and that is when we go into food spaces and we know if there's Black food energy, because we see foods that are familiar to what we eat. When we see, you know, jewelry, you know, bookstore, not just a bookstore in the Black community. You got, you can get incense, you can get jewelry, you can get clothes, you can get some postcards, you got food back there, you can get a whole bunch of, so, you know, when you go into spaces and you don't see not just the foods, but you don't see that energy. But everybody has their recycled bag, and everybody talks about a sense of belonging, except for the people who don't belong. And so, you know, I talk a little bit about that and my own experiences there, and then an experience that I had. And then I spent some time talking to young people. You know, my daughter factors pretty much in the, who is with us today, factors in the book, because she had her own experience of being you know, body shamed in elementary school, where the health teacher told the young children to get on the scale in front of each other, and then, you know, was, I don't know if he called out their weight or just made it public. And then told them that most of them were gonna die from obesity because they were overweight. And this is a predominantly Black elementary school. And so I remember when the incident happened, of course I went to school and it all fell out deaf ears, but then to hear my daughter recount it many years later let me know the effect that it had on her. And so I tie her story to one of a young lady also in the DMV area who was featured in a Washington Post expose on young lives at risk, and they were talking about young people passing away from obesity. And so I do a reading on this story because there was a photo display that went along with the story. And if you looked at the photographs, because my training is really, I am a culinary historian, as some people say, but I'm really trained to understand how Black people relate to our material world, the things that we engage with every day, books, music, clothes, whatever. And so I'll just say this very quickly. The story that the Washington Post tells and allows this young lady to tell about her life is so damaging and so shaming that I hope she has not gone back and read it, because it paints her as, it almost reinforces the very thing they were trying to be critical of. Young children calling her King Kong because she was tall and heavyset in 6th or 7th grade. And the more I read the story and thought about my own child's experience, I also said, there's some questions here that we aren't asking. Like, why is this young woman living in this area when, with a caregiver, which the story tells? Where are her parents? Where are her grandparents? Is she in foster care? I mean, I looked at her clothes compared to the other girls in the picture, and I said, she's wearing the same clothes. It could all have been the same day, but the other girls had on different clothes. And so the article goes on to really shame her because they talk about she would rather eat soul food than a fresh salad. But why does she have to make that choice? Why can't she do both? Why does it have to be that Black folks have to do an either or scenario, right? That's number one. And then number two, when she does cook with her caretaker, the article glosses right over that and focuses on the fact that they're eating soul food and that she just doesn't have the willpower to change. Instead of celebrating the fact that this young lady is learning how to cook and she's learning life skills, and this woman's teaching her how to sew and, giving her moments of joy in bonding. Those may be the times she's telling this woman about her troubles. None of that. Of course, the article wasn't designed to do that, because the article is the crooked room and she's balancing on the crooked chair. So I was very clear that the article wasn't designed to do that, but I want us as Black people to read this book and see how we should be reading her experience that way. So there's that conversation. And then lastly, I reference Pastor Howard John Wesley from Alfred Street Baptist Church and his notion of sacralization, or he takes up after another theologian named Kane Hope Felder to talk about sacralization, which is the ways in which people use scripture to justify, all kinds of things that they want people to believe about themselves. So there's lots of different ways in here that I talk about the shaming, but ultimately I want to leave people with worry about yourself. It's really what I did in the last chapter.
Yeah, truly. Honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone? I want to open up the floor for questions from y'all. What? Anybody got a question, a comment, a testimony?
It's okay if you want to talk about changing your diet.
I see a question on your face.
I will have a couple of different ideas. Not quite sure if there's questions, so I would just say come back to me.
So being a stalker of this woman, I've seen her speak so many times this summer. It's been really kind of a class in understanding.
You're more like a stan, I said.
I stand with you. I stand with her for sure. And while I appreciate the book and the context, even the title does bring in, right? But the idea of this concept of appreciating what we are when we eat. Now, I remember the first time you spoke in your part of the group that spoke at the Kennedy Center after Grace the Musical, and the issue had come up around this, like, as always, having soul food meals, these feasts, and all the things that are talked about. And I remember it being said, and I wasn't sure if it was, I don't remember if it was you, but it was this notion in that conversation, was the idea that any food can be hazardous to you if you're eating it all the time. Those big meals that are big on Sunday meals, that is not a daily meal to have, right? So as you reiterate this idea of these things are not bad for you in and of themselves. It's the context in which you overindulge, right? Or you take something, and you can have greens and turkey. You can have all these things. So I'm appreciating all that. I'm appreciating that the lactose thing didn't come up. So being I share what you said, and love my ice cream, right? And love my strawberry and chocolate milkshake. But the idea that these things are still part of whatever our palate likes is what our palate likes. And we can definitely be trained or taught differently, but there's still an idea of us being happy in what we're eating, not eating for someone else, but for our own well-being. Unless our doctor's telling us to like my doctor said.
When I was in grad school, I realized that this is the case. I was finishing my master's degree. I was so stressed out. So stressed out. Grad school will do it to you, right? Yeah. Anything can do it to your job. But I had eaten some ice cream, and the next day I woke up and my head was like, and I couldn't breathe. And a girlfriend of mine at the time said, call Dr. Giselle. He's up in Baltimore. Call him. He's both an MD and a holistic. So an MD. And so I called him and he said, have you had dairy? And I said, yeah. Yeah, a lot of it. And he was like, get off all dairy and go get some vitamin C crystals with bioflavonoids. Okay. He said, you don't just want, regular vitamin C, but you want, please, you want vitamin C crystals with bioflavonoids. And I have told this story. I have made this recommendation to so many people who have talked about allergies and stuff. And so I then went out and had something which clearly was MSG because again I couldn't breathe. And so, but that's a regular part of my life, right? I don't much eat dairy. I went to almond. Oh, it used to be rice milk and rice dream and soy. First it was soy, then it was rice. Now it's almond, right? Right, and every other kind of air milk. It's not milk, it's not cow milk. That's what I know.
And lactate pills.
Everybody. I got a whole lactate, But does that mean you stop eating pizza? Does that mean you don't have ice cream? No, but I also know if I'm going to have a small thing of ice cream, I have to either take lactose but definitely every day I'm taking that vitamin C, right? And so my point simply is, I don't know why we feel like we got to live in these either or dichotomies. I got to live like this, or I have to. Child, we spend so much time being traumatized in our own minds around stuff that the world is telling us we need to do. That again, food is factored very low on that totem pole. Because we're trying to walk this line to be good citizens in America, like we've always done, and that's no shame in that. We've always, because we want to be able to move forward and move our families forward. No shame at all. Problem comes in when that's the only way that we think about living our lives based on what we are told we need to do. And what I'm suggesting is if you read any of these books over here about the Nile Valley civilization and our origins in the Americas, you will find a much more dynamic set of people in this world who consider themselves part of the African diaspora. And I think we need to start adopting a few more of those ways of living as opposed to just listening to what folks are telling us in a society that wasn't built for us, but built by us. A word.
Okay, I'll interject. Yeah, the title is definitely savoring. A little bit too what you just lastly shared regarding the young girl, take it. And the reason I guess I resonate a little bit, whether it was eating the salad or the soul food, I had that dilemma earlier today. I was hungry and I was like, and I bought a salad. But I also bought some, I think, Chipotle. And right, because it was, and mind you, I did have stuff in the refrigerator, but it was a time thing because I was supposed to wash my hair earlier today. That didn't happen. So things just shifted for me. And by the time I realized and I got so famished, I savored something hot. So it wasn't a matter of, because both of them are healthy to me, but I needed hot at the time. I didn't, the salad, and I love it. That's why I bought it. But I wanted hot at the time, and that was the first thing that came to my mind when I said, wait up. It could have been a winter night or a cold day or whatever, and the young lady just wanted something hot to keep her, as opposed to a salad that she could have later on. And I was like, oh my gosh. And to that, I just wanted to ask, do you probe and go a little bit into, as much as we want to validate and take, or to say, release from the world the shame it does to us, when we are, just mindlessly eating, it connects to the body. Do you talk a little bit about body shaming in this book? Because I just see that, and I'm reminded of, it's interesting that we're in CDC weekend or what have you, but it was probably a good decade ago, and some young ladies were between Midwest and South, and the story always stood with me because it blew my mind, because outside knowing their story, you just see them as obese. But they ate to kind of formally protect themselves from homeboys. So that they would be, whatever that situation was going on, that was their level of protection, because then unwanted attention would have came to them and only because of food. Right. So it's not like they were, DNA, when we call big bone, it's not like they were destined to be big bone or what have you, or obese, but that's how they compensated their level of protection for whatever was going on. And it was a little cluster of girls, and they, that was their thing, and I was like, but outside looking in, you would be like, girl, and it always humbled me, because when I heard that, I said, there's more to the story. And so I expressed that and think that, again, with the food, that was their protection. But then outside looking in, that could also lead to the shaming of the body. So do you talk a little bit about that?
I do. I give some instances of that. And a couple of years ago, there was an article in the New York Times by a colleague of mine who said Black women want to be fat, PHAT. And there was a huge backlash in that conversation. And I understand for her and her family, they were trying to break a cycle of illness that they attributed to diet. Because, when we hear things like high blood pressure and diabetes, we immediately think diet. But we forget about all of the environmental factors that contribute also to high blood pressure, and also genetics being one, and so forth. And so, yes, I do talk about that instance. And I also talk about, moving into this notion that Black people don't want to exercise. I'll never forget, I had a colleague who said, there's a white man somewhere out in Idaho who's running with freedom right now, down the street, just jogging. And he's like, and we're sitting here worried about what people are thinking because we're the only two Blacks in this cafe. This notion that Black folks don't work out is, of course, we know, crazy. At the same time, you think about Ahmaud Arbery, who went out for a good run and never came home. So, so there's a lot of tied into that, right? But in terms of the body shaming thing, I like Twitter late at night before I go to sleep, and sometimes I'm like, I gotta shut this business down. Because of course the most obvious and popular person I can mention right now is Lizzo. But there are lots of Lizzos out there in real life who we encounter, and we just assume, oh, they eat this, that, and and it hurts I hurt for her because I see her doing things like sharing that she's vegan. Who cares? I don't care if you're vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, breatharian, what, live your life, live your life. If you are healthy, even if you don't look it, and you're certainly beautiful in that, that just means that all the mostly men and folks who are like, that's obese, that's not that. Lots of us got lots of different things going on in our lives that we can't see on the body,
Come on.
but that we probably need to address as well. But so she becomes a very low-hanging fruit. And that's the problem I have with that, especially when it's Black women. We become low-hanging fruit. There's this other thing on Twitter right now where this woman was trying to talk about body positivity, and a former friend of hers was like, yeah, that's just unhealthy. Says who? It may not be pleasing to your eyes, and that's okay, because you have a different preference. But let's not talk about healthy, because those comments are equally as unhealthy.
That's right.
For me, as my body might appear to you, right? Because you have, again, the unmitigated goal to actually come out and say, you think I'm this, that, and the other. And where do we get that from? Why are we grabbing in the bucket? Why are we doing that to each other? Why are we not? What happened to say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud? What happened to be young, gifted, and Black? What happened to I'm appreciating your afro, sister, or I'm appreciating your locks, or, brother, you look good with your, full face. What happened to those things? You know what happened? We decided in corporate America it wasn't acceptable for us to do thus and so, and to look this way, and to be this way, and to talk this way, and to affirm each other. Like we have some kind of problem saying, you look great today, sis. I love it. I love the color. It's like we are ashamed to say those kinds of things. And what I'm suggesting is that comes back to the food, because it's a part of our whole being. We don't get disconnected from those things. It's all a part of who we are, right? And so I gladly give up my BMW if it means that, I don't have a BMW. I'm just saying, I would gladly give up my BMW, though, if it means that we are walking in some level of freedom. And I think right now we're not. And I think that is pleasing to the capitalist society in which we live and work, because, again, it keeps us divided, it keeps us off center, it keeps us off kilter, it keeps us full of disease, right? As I said a couple of weeks ago, again, if you're talking about people who came through centuries of horrific trauma and brutality, watch Sankofa. Watch that film, which I understand is now on digitally remastered on Netflix. Watch it so that you can get a real good understanding of the ways in which we were treated, men, women, boys, and girls who were raped with disregard, and not just with body parts, but with themes, limbs torn asunder, children ripped from. You mean to tell me we are now in 2022 and we don't understand why Black folks have mental health challenges? Really? But our food is killing us. Help me with that. Right? So, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I guess 2 questions. So my first one, you reminded me of when I was back there looking at Frederick Robertson's Black Marxism and talking about how we can't really imagine how capitalism began without thinking about the necessity of slavery and creating a capitalist institution. So I guess my question is, and maybe talk about this in the book, because I haven't read it yet.
I know you're gonna read it. It's one of my students, right?
I was wondering, even like our ideas about healthy, and you kind of talked about this earlier, this seemingly neutrality to our ideas of what health is. Could you speak about maybe even like in the medical and health industry, how those ideas about what is healthy, even what is high blood pressure, what is diabetes, what is metabolism, has been affected by this racialized capitalism, and like how that has played into the ways in which, or how that has played into Black people's relationship with food, because of the ways that these medical doctors are defining what is healthy, and it's not a neutral term.
No, it's not.
Racialized, like it's a racialized capitalist definition. And then I guess my second question would be, the mantra of your book is worry about yourself. And so I wonder, me who like is thinking about like the spirituality of food is like often so communal, and the ways in which, to me, to combat shame often happens within the community. So how do you, is worry about yourself, is that like an individual action, or is that like a phrase that really means worry about ourselves and healing ourselves, and how do we engage in this worry about yourself that resists this American individualism that is very detrimental?
She's so smart.
Yeah.
You won't put me on the spot like that. No, these are all great questions. Really. But let me take the second one first. Yes, worry about yourself, which I take from the Metro worker, the mulatto worker. I think it does both works there. You should do some self-reflection and self-examination if you're out there shaming other people. Okay, so that's the individual even within the community. Because even on that train, they were in a community of people commuting. All right? Because we're always within community. Within the Black communities, because we're multiple, right? We're not monolithic, we're multiple. If I'm taking care of myself, then I'm doing some things I need to do in order to make sure that you can also thrive. And part of that means to check my thinking and check my words. That's what's distressing to me about being on Twitter late at night and listening to people tear each other down. I'm like, how are we don't have to worry about anybody else doing it because we do it enough for ourselves. Yes. Okay? I'm not talking about your sexual preference or your orientation. I'm talking about worrying about each other as people in these United States trying to move through this racist society that wants really at its core to kill us, and also they need us for the labor. Okay, so they don't know, they're in a whole Janet's face, love, hate. We don't know what to do, right? We love you, but we want to kill you at the same time. So I feel like as a community of people, encouraging each other, instead of always, come to my house and you bring different kinds of foods. I'm like, okay, I may not eat it, but okay, that's all right, that's fine. And if maybe you eat vegetarian, maybe you eat this, maybe you eat that, okay, fine. There's a story that I tell in the book about a corner store, I think it's in DC as well, where the person goes, every day they go in there, they get the fried chicken, they put all the salt on it. And the woman behind the counter says, so this was a study done by somebody. She's like, you're going to kill yourself with all that salt. He's like, yep, and I'm going to die happy. Right? Because taste, going back to your point, taste makes a difference, right? And so while all that salt may not appeal to you, perhaps my taste buds are a little bit different, especially now coming out of COVID, where I may be just getting my taste back, Or maybe you can say to me, add some onion powder and some garlic powder to elevate the taste. Add some lemon to pop it a little. Whatever we can do, right, to work with each other. Okay. So there's that point, and then the medical establishment. I mean, we always know Big Pharma and our medical establishment go hand in hand. But I'll give you this story of full transparency. When I was pregnant at one point, I went to the student health department and had my blood pressure taken. And the woman who was taking my blood pressure was like, your blood pressure is very elevated and blah, blah. She was getting ready to go into this whole story. And she walked away, and there was a Black nurse there who said, ask them for a larger cup. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't even know what that is. And so when the other nurse came back, I said, I need you to take it again, and I need a larger cup. She put a larger cup on, and my blood pressure was fine. So we need more people because I didn't know that lady was even looking out for me, but she was, and she heard the whole conversation. So, this is one of the reasons why people go on again, social media and say representation matters. Not just representation. We need people who are informed about, Black health.
That's right.
To be able to say to us, you need to get to the hospital right away. Or this person is in distress. So we applaud Serena for saying, I'm in distress. I know my body, I'm in distress. And we know far too many women. I had a soror who passed away many, many years ago, who developed some kind of rare disease upon, once when she was pregnant, and ended up passing away in childbirth, in getting childbirth. But we need people who know what that looks like. My last situation, I was sitting an older white man and we were talking. He was like, so are you in any pain? And I said, no, I'm not in pain. We kept on talking. I said, look, okay, the only thing that's happening, my arm is hurting as I have some occasional pain. And he stopped and said, I asked you if you were in any pain. And I said, well, I'm not. He's like, you need to get to the emergency room right away. Okay, I didn't understand there was an ectopic pregnancy that I was experiencing. But maybe if I had had a Black woman, she would have asked some different questions, right? Because I didn't know what he meant. I thought he meant, am I having, lower body pain? Am I having pain in my back? Who got pain? I mean, he's like, okay, my arm, all right, if you must know, my arm is hurting. And as it turns out, it could have been deadly. It could have gone a different way. So I say all that to say we need to follow our bodies and we need to know our bodies. And sometimes, as my daughter said to me, Mom, I'm not taking this anymore. She said, I'm not doing it. And I said, okay. And we had to go that route. And we did go that route. And then we stopped and we regrouped. But I had to listen to her because she was listening to her body. And that's the other thing I want to just quickly say. Sometimes while we're passing all this judgment, we don't know people. I had a student who was taking medication for narcolepsy. And it was a steroid, so she gained some weight. But this is another reason why we gotta stop shaming people, because my taking this medication may keep me from going the hell off on you right now. Right? And that's not because I'm crazy, it's because I need something to stabilize my mood, and I'm taking lots of different things from medication to weed, whatever, something in between. So we just have to be careful, is my point about all of this shit.
We absolutely have to be careful, because I'll give a story for myself. You talked about stressing out in grad school earlier. I just came out of grad school this past May.
Hey.
Thank you. I'm a double bison. I went through the ringer at Howard twice. Don't ask me how I did it. But so this past year, I lost 40 pounds. I've never been this small in my life, not even in high school. And I kept it. It was so strange because while I was never necessarily considered overweight, I guess, growing up with half my family being, from the islands, body criticism is kind of normal. Even just regular Black families, body criticism is very normal. My grandmother's constantly sucking your stomach, but then also passing you a big ass plate of food. So it doesn't make it make sense. But so then I lost all this weight, and everyone's looking at me differently, and they're admiring this weight loss, and I'm like, y'all, I'm sick. I'm literally sick. People tell you to eat fruits and vegetables. I couldn't eat any fruits. I'm still my stomach just got back right, or it is just starting to get back right. I don't even know if I can eat fruits yet, because everything I was putting in my mouth that I was normally eating was rejecting from me. Nothing everything I grew up eating that I loved eating was no, you can't eat that no more. You can't eat that. You can't eat that. And I went on such a strict diet for myself that, I really made fun of the fact that I had to eat literally the same food every day, because it was I cannot deviate from this, or I'm gonna have a ridiculous headache, or I'm gonna have a reaction in my mouth, or my throat's gonna feel closed or feel try or whatever. And it's like, as Black women, you know, we're expected to have like a little shape to us. So like losing like all this weight was like, it made me, you know, doubt my Black womanhood. Like it was like, oh, like now you don't got an ass no more. Now you know, now you can't say you got, you know, a little junk in the trunk. And it's like that's a big thing for us, you know. That's how those are like mating ritual. And so it's just like, it's funny how like, you know, when you're growing up and you're looking at the media, you're like, oh, I should be this skinny person. I should, like, skinny is like considered healthy. And I literally experienced the polar opposite of that. And it really got me thinking, like, wow, we really don't know what's going on with anyone ever. And it's like,
and thank you for sharing. No, thank you for sharing that. But I'm going to end with this in saying that food is very personal. Food is very personal, and because on any given day and at any given time, we make hundreds of decisions around food. What does my time look like? What does my taste feel like? What is my body accepting? What is it rejecting? You know, what do I have? Where can I get it? You know, how much money do I have? I mean, literally, the list can go on and on. So when you think about that in relation to the comments that people flippantly make to us, when you weigh those two, you realize why I say worry about yourself.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on in my life.
That's right.
You don't know what I'm dealing with and just moving through. And it doesn't have to be trauma. You know, it could just be my schedule.
Yeah.
It could just be, I'm trying to finish this book because I got to make this deadline, because I got to get this promotion, because I got a child about to go to college, because I got to, so that means I got to order food from so-and-so because I don't have time today to cook. And that might mean I got to order tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and then I'll make it up on the back end. Then I got to worry about whether or not how much salt we're consuming. But you don't know what people are dealing with. So to make these kinds of judgments about people's bodies, about what people are putting in their mouths, how people are engaging in communities to eat, I think is ridiculous. And I need us to be more clear about why it's important to worry about yourself. I'll end on that.
Thank you so much. This has been a lovely conversation. Does anyone else have any
Question? Oh, okay,
final questions?
Mm-hmm. No.
Yeah, let the brother take a bite.
Why you ain't ready?
While he's thinking, can I just say, I just want to acknowledge you mentioned earlier the idea around the anti-Black racism, and it reminds me of something we do when we do our racial equity work. The idea of internalized racism is at the heart of this. Yes. And so you were talking about the idea that you don't have the look.
Yes.
And so that internalization of that, again, leads to these other, possibly unhealthy practices without knowing what the folks are. So naming this as anti-Blackness is another part of that should not be overlooked.
You're still Black.
You know that's Black, for sure.
You're still Black.
Absolutely.
And then come back.
Okay,
If you want it.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, because the body does change. The body goes. That was a legit body rejection. But I've gone through some different changes, and I was like, oh, I used to be able to eat that. Well, not anymore.
Not anymore.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, the internalized perceptions that we have about ourselves. I missed for the first part of your talk. I apologize.
No worries.
The internalized perceptions that we have on ourselves, how does that feed into the general perceptions that we lay onto others, and how does that in turn feed? Like, it's sort of like the beast that, an Ouroboros that feed each other.
That's right.
And for the first part and the second part is, what nuanced way does the corporatocracy plays directly in that dynamic?
I think the nuanced way that the corporatocracy plays into the dynamic is, That's embodied, one way it's embodied is in people like the Kardashians, who somehow become the standard of beauty by adopting things that Black folk have been doing all along. And another recent tweet, I think, was talking with my daughter about this, was around Hailey Bieber.
Hailey.
Right. Hailey Bieber. Hailey Bieber. And, you know, putting on this lips, you know, lip lining and stuff. And Black women in particular were like, okay, we've been doing that for years. Okay, that's not. But I think that type of influencer piece really leads us then to want to be like, I want to live this life, right? And I want to look this way to be acceptable. Now, how do we internalize it? One of the things I was saying is by, and it's especially insidious right now with social media. Between, you know, you can have this fast money and you can live this big life and you can travel all over the world. There's another part of that. You got to pay taxes. Nobody's telling you you got to pay those taxes. If you don't, the IRS will come for you. Also, you know, if you have different family dynamics, children, elderly care, you may not have that life of luxury. But, you know, so that's part of how we internalize these messages without deconstructing them. And I think it does feed into the corporatocracy because then I want to work harder. I want to do this. I want to be on, you know, what is it, Foursquare or whatever that company is called, the Forex or whatever. I want to be, next thing you know, your head is all torn up because you out there day trading. Oh my God, I lost millions. Oh Lord, I got it back. I mean, seriously, I mean, I know people like this who are like, you know, I lost $500 today, and so now you're mad with me. Because you are stressed out trying to live an illusion that you really don't need to be trying to live. Are you at peace? And then you get the money that you think you want, and then you have a heart attack.
Come on.
Not necessarily because of your diet, but because you stressed yourself out trying to live an illusion that you saw on social media. Again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with success. Absolutely not. I'm thankful and blessed to be where I am, and I work really hard for that. But I also know the sacrifices. I know the sacrifices to my body. I know the sacrifices to my emotional health. I know the sacrifices to my mental health. I know the sacrifices to my family. I know lots of this worry about yourself because I know what's going on over here, and I know the cost. If you peel back that layer, you'll see all of us got a little bit of dirt up under that carpet.
Right.
So I think it's problematic for us to walk around as if we have it all figured out, because your moment can be up tomorrow at any time. And it has nothing to do with food. It could be because you were at a stoplight. It could be because you were walking down the street and you look suspicious because you have on a hoodie. It could be because it's your time. It could be because you found out you got some kind of diagnosis and didn't know. But, so there's lots of ways I think that the corporatocracy feeds into that. And I would like for us to step away from that and take the time we need to think about what those messages are saying to us, especially as it relates to our labor as Black people in this country.
Thank you.
Kev, you wanna give a question?
Yeah, I want to make some comments. Please. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. I feel so enlightened and at home.
Thank
So these are conversations that we need to be having, and you're making me want to get up and give comments and share my story. So this is powerful work. This is legacy building.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah. Whew. And Christina Joy is doing a great job as moderator. That's my friend, y'all.
Joy is in her name, right?
And I one note, like I said, is my student, my child, at 7. Can you raise your hand? That's my child. And her friend Tatiana, my other daughter back there. So it does take a community, I think, to do this thing. And I appreciate, that shout out, because this is legacy building work. I mean, people always ask me, how's the book selling? I really don't care from the standpoint of funds. it's nice. I'm thankful, you know. But I wrote this book during COVID. And I said to my daughter, I said, we got to shut the house down because I got to get this book done. Because I had to get promoted, you see. I didn't want to write this book. This isn't the book I wanted to write. It was another one, but it was going to take me too long to research it. But like I said, I knew I had a child about to go to college and I had to get to a certain place in my career so that I could also, because I'm also happen to be a department chair, so I can match wits with people on that campus who think I don't know what I'm talking about.
Come on.
Okay? So that was for me, this is that labor. This is that work I had to do. Talk about the corporatocracy. I knew what I needed to do to be able to say, I'm where you are.
Come on now.
And I earned every bit of it. And I earned it during COVID. And my child sacrificed because her mom wasn't cooking. Right? And so we did have to eat almost every night. Oh, you gotta do Chipotle. What's tomorrow? Thai. Okay, what's the next week? We're going to China the next night. Then we're going over to West Africa. We probably ate from every continent. While this book was being written. So I'm thankful that it's now in print, and mostly I'm thankful because I struggled with it, but I felt like I had a message that I just wanted people to talk. I just wanted Black folks to talk, and I wanted Black folks to look at it and stop letting this society tell us how we are to live, right? Push back on that, do the reading, understand our histories, our food histories, our actual histories. And once you do that, hopefully people will be empowered to move forward with a different way of thinking and be empowered to say, you know, you should probably worry about your own thing. Yeah, the business that pays you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all so much. Please come back October 12th. We have Kiara Imani, author of Therapy Isn't Just for White People. You know we all need to have that conversation. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Interested in doing this. I think maybe what we I'll run the website and see,
Thank you.
But Tony, my daughter, with her hair, she does want to, but she's open to,
She would love to see you.
they're doing the work. So I think she would want
Absolutely.
to, whatever kind of,
Sure.
be the first.
And then she can also just,
Some of the team. There's going to probably be some fun or something, whatever, but I think the idea, I want something to be here in DC. I don't feel like I need to do it.
I don't know how far Irvine is from Davis.
And there are other people who,
Davis.
it's a bit far.
It's a bit far.
Everybody is good.
Yeah, I'm down.
Oh, okay.
I don't know
I
her
was
very well.
just in San Francisco.
I've been on one of her DJ sessions, and she has asked.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because I was talking to
I would love to chat.
that's what they do something for her.
Oh, no kidding.
She produced me a video out on Wednesday. It was so funny. She cited you in her undergrad.
Okay.